Thanks for coming to my talk, having me hear everything. So what I want to go over is what I don't have any firsthand experience doing anything except making slides. But when I've talked with people and researched and looked up on what people have been doing, mostly talking with people about it, what the role of platform engineering with the emerging practices they're doing to support AI, mostly generative AI, but I'm just going to say AI, in their organization. And I'll get into a little bit of what I think platform engineering is, just to level set and things like that. But in kind of doing this over the past couple of months, talking with a lot of customers that we work with, it's kind of I don't know if it's paradox is the right word, but it's kind of a paradoxically complicated situation. Because when you look at the way that AI systems and services, models, inference, whatever you want to call it, is used in organizations, it's not really that different than any other service that a platform engineer, an operations person might support, whether it's like a database or some eventing system, whatever it may be, just some, as we used to say, capability that you want to provide people. But on the other hand, it's been done for so little, for such a short amount of time, that we're not really quite sure what it looks like, nor, as I'll get into, even what the use cases or customers are yet. And so from that standpoint, you can kind of take two different ways of thinking about what platform engineers or operations people do for AI. One is just the same thing they've always done. And two is like, what's crazy and new and interesting that people have to pay attention to, which we'll get into. Or I guess you don't have to pay attention to it unless you want to and it's your job. But I think that combination of things and sort of the collection of topics that come up, I sometimes like to begin my talks with the conclusions in case you want to leave. These seem to be the set of things that are coming up that platform engineer types, that operations people, that they start to be responsible for, need to provide, suffer from even. And none of these, like I was saying, seem extremely out of the ordinary if you spend some time imagining it. And there's a few of them that are particular, or peculiar, if you will, to AI workloads, like registries for your agentic things, how you're supporting testing out the responses that various AI things have, evals, testing, safety, whatever you want to call it. I get the lingo for this stuff wrong all the time, so you'll have to pardon me if I list off things to make sure I say at least one of the right words. Of course, something that I'll talk briefly about, there's a lot of policy and governance boards, centers of excellences involved, setting things. But then a lot of the things are what you would expect, right? If we are running or providing access to our own AI models or inference or whatever, and you're the person responsible for that, you start to want to have control over it and the ability to manage it by whatever you might want to call it, having a gateway or a middle person or a choke point, some point of control, instead of having the developers using this or other people, as we're getting into, go out and use it on their own. So I'm not going to go over all of these, but I'm going to go over some of them. But I think the point is that when you look at this new capacity, this new capability, this new service, there's a lot of the familiar things that you would expect that if you're running and managing this and providing it especially to application developers, that you just sort of do, which should be a great relief to someone in this role, because then it means it's not this strange new thing you have to figure out, like containers and Kubernetes like 5 years ago. It's pretty normal and basic. But then it also has enough difference that it's kind of interesting. So to that end, the other way of summarizing it a little bit is to look at kind of the roles and responsibilities, the activities, and the groups involved in doing things. And I have on top here what the, let's say, traditional, the normal, the current things that a platform engineer does. And you can see that divided amongst the application developer teams, the developers, the platform teams. And then there's this third category that's like platform teams and AI teams. It's not quite known who does each of the things on the, I guess, on your right, the two right columns there. So, you're supporting developers doing things, they need these tools, and you're trying to make things faster for them, easier for developers to use. But when it comes to AI, right, like both of these are kind of normal, but the thing that's certainly normal is you think about the case of a developer, hopefully, what you would like your application developer to be doing is working on the application, not only writing the code, thinking about product managing it, all of that other stuff that happens other than just writing code, but you really want them to spend as little time as possible, not because they're not doing a good job at it, but as little time as possible just like on infrastructure and requesting things and doing stuff that doesn't directly reflect in their application, right? And the application is like what runs your organization, and so it's important for them to spend their time on that. I mean, obviously the infrastructure runs it, but the features in the application are how the business manifests itself and how the organization runs, what it does. And then you move over here, and this is where some things it hasn't quite settled out, but maybe the platform engineers are the ones running the models and selecting them and updating them. They're probably I don't know. You can't really say. Well, I guess you could say. You can't say AI ops, because that was something, if you remember, 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe we can reuse that term, but maybe you could say Fin AI ops, or would it be AI Fin ops? We'll figure out how that works out. There's got to be an ops in there somewhere. But probably the platform engineers are the ones who have a lot to do with monitoring for cost and even controlling for cost, putting the policy guardrails in place. These are very traditional things that a platform engineer does, rather than having the application developers do it on their own. Now, I think as you move over, this role, the role of which models do you pick, when do you decide to upgrade a model, if you do any sort of fine-tuning or whatever, making your own models is going to pan out. But if you do some customizations of the models that you do, is the platform engineer going to do that, or do you have some new, I'm just going to say data scientists, because that sounds really cool. Are you going to have some data scientist people who are responsible for this? It seems like if you're doing all of your platform engineering stuff, it's going to be a lot of extra work for you to understand what the thousands and thousands of things over at Hugging Face mean. I can barely sort out what the difference between all this stuff is, let alone how to apply it to your organization, right? And so I think in many cases, because this isn't a very mature set of practices, a lot of different people end up selecting the models. And sometimes that's platform engineers, sometimes that's developers, sometimes it's whatever this new role is, the data scientists. So as an introduction to myself, and then I'll get into kind of what I think are the more important things to consider about what a platform engineer would do, how you would support running your AI stuff internally for your application developers, and maybe some other roles. This is me. There's a picture of me. I'm Coté. I have a first name, but no one really calls me by that. I've been lucky to work at Pivotal, and then VMware, and now once it was VMware Tanzu by Broadcom. Now it's just Tanzu by Broadcom, if I got that right. But I've worked there for about 10 years, and I really have focused on talking with mostly larger organizations about just how they get better at software, how they use their software to run their business. And a lot of that brings in platform as a service, cloud native stuff, all of this interesting stuff, at least to me, that we've done nowadays. And I've been an analyst at a couple of places like Redmonk and 451, and I'm from Austin, Texas originally, so you have to serve a compulsory 2-year term at Dell if you work in the tech industry there. So I worked at on M&A and software for cloud stuff while I was there. And I've written several books, and I do podcasts and stuff like that. As one of my friends likes to say, engage with my brand. If you care. Now moving on. So, like I said, there's a lot of things moving around here, and it hasn't quite settled out. So I think whenever I'm, talking about a subject like this that's moving, I like to assign homework as the first thing, which is to say, these are some great sources that if you're really interested in this topic, I'd recommend looking at each of these. And they each go way more in depth into various things that I'll kind of gloss over or talk about here. In particular, if you're really interested in the technology, the problems, and the stack, these 2 talks by Patrick Dubois, who's one of the DevOps people, very very sweet Belgian guy. He does a fantastic job of very rapidly laying out what the stack is, what all the needs that you have, and the concerns. And there's some other things in here that I think are really worth looking at. Especially, I'll mention it briefly, but this talk from Angie here at Block, formerly Square, it really you'll see when I get to it, but it kind of highlighted a very interesting new type of customer, if you will, a user for what I think platform engineers would do, and potentially kind of gives you a jump start on maybe the primary use case for all this AI stuff in organizations for the next few years. So speaking of, I think this was commissioned by Broadcom from IDC, fantastic outfit. But when it comes to platform engineering for AI, right, like I think primarily, the main value that it brings, the main reason you want to do it is because you're running it on your own, because you have private cloud AI. Now, you would be accessing public models and public things out there, probably all of them, kind of brokering, if you like that old word from cloud, or providing a gateway to that, right? But there's also the interest in running these things on your own, whatever different like model and performance characteristics that you have. And indeed, you see that in surveys like this one that show, I'm not really sure how edge is defined here, but I guess it's not public cloud, so you can lump it in with the red or have it be a totally separate category, whatever you like. But you can see that with surveys you have to use the words very precisely. You can see that the primary place that these surveys respondents are looking to run things, it's, you could say it's 50-50 or whatever, depending on how you want to do things. Maybe it's a tiny bit more private cloud on premises, if you prefer. But you can see that it's a very real thing that people want, at least these respondents, want to run and manage AI stuff on their own. And that's where a platform engineer becomes key, right? Because it's one thing if you're just doing some light governance and controls over someone in the public cloud running these services. It's another if you're doing it on your own plus that. So with that in mind, right, a lot of this is oriented around, that instance where you're running your own platform, combining together those two different things. Although I suppose some of the practices could apply if it was purely public cloud as well. But let's look at what the platform looks like, the kind of a view that, like I was saying, Patrick does a really great job in full-length talks at. And start by looking at what that is by just making sure, whenever you say the word platform engineering in a presentation, you're obligated to have this slide that references the kind of definitional write-up of platforms, and platform engineering wasn't said back then, by Evan at ThoughtWorks back in 2018, to give you a notion of what a platform is, right? And I think what's really important, there's two things, if I remember my platform engineering gospel correctly, there's two things that's important to pull out of here. One is that you're focused on developers, right? You're focused on groups in your organization that are writing software custom to your organization that your organization is running to operate as part of their business, right? I guess you could have platform engineering for like ERP systems, but it's not really covered very much in the lore. Now, the other part that's very important to look at here is that self-service nature to it, which I think since 2018, we kind of take that for granted, or at least we assume you would have that. But that is really a huge focus of what platform engineering is doing, is making it so that the development teams don't really have to wait around for something. They don't have to do that more traditional asking for something and planning it out. And you do that for most all of the things that a developer needs, all the functions that they have, whether it's packaging up the applications, adding in the various services and middleware that they want, even making sure that they're passing your security and your governance things. But that's kind of an idea of the goal of what a platform is and what platform engineering does, right? And to give you a visual of it, and then we'll get into the AI part of it, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, the home of Kubernetes and other great products, they came out with a reference architecture for what a platform looks like a couple years ago, which is great, because then I can use that and not appear to be biased for what we sell to pay my monthly bills at the same time, apparently. But you can look at what this is, and you should read the paper. There's a great platform maturity model that they have as well that kind of gives you a sense of what this looks like over years when you're putting a platform in place. But with that idea of what a platform is, you look at it and you're like, yeah, it makes sense. These are like all the things that a developer would need, right? Plus some of the production operational things that you would have thrown in there. And I think what's really important to pay attention to here is that the exact type of infrastructure isn't necessarily part of the platform, right? The platform tends to be something that runs on top of infrastructure, right? It does that work of integrating down with it, which is exactly what you see in my favorite platform, the VMware Tanzu platform based on Cloud Foundry. It runs on whatever infrastructure you might have. It pulls in, this type of middleware into that very self-service nature of doing things. And of course, I probably wouldn't be talking here if it didn't do AI stuff. But having that notion of what the platform looks like, I think, is very important so you've got that crisp idea. So whenever the notion of a developer platform comes up, of course, I would recommend starting with this, but you can always go get the C and CF diagram and say, like, is this a platform? And kind of start planning out what you're doing and thinking about it. Now, there's two other diagrams I want to show you. Again, like what exactly the role of platform engineers for AI is kind of evolving, and people are figuring it out. But at the Platform Con conference, the Humanitech people who kind of run that conference, they put forward this model, which is not a complete model of what all of a platform does, right? But it gives you a notion of, if you think about what developers and other people are doing when they use Gen AI services, you can kind of see they're trying to place it in that stack, the various activities that you have, right? So you can see, there's a notion of an internal developer portal, not to be confused with the platform, but you can kind of see the developers' activities here, right? You can see how you pull in the data and the applications that you have, how you're orchestrating all that. Then we get into the very AI-specific things in the upper right there, right? Like managing and serving up the models, having a registry for not only the models, but the various like agentic things, whether it's model context protocol, MCP things, or whatever may win out in the future, and so forth, right? And I think this is probably a good notion of what's in that stack. It doesn't go over like who does what, or exactly which, if this is a developer versus a platform thing. But again, you can see that thing I mentioned in the beginning where you could kind of just replace the word database for a lot of this, and it would look pretty much the same, right? You would have the same kind of things going on that you would want to do, aside from a few things here and there. Now, also at Platform Con, which had a lot of great talks about AI in the platform engineering world, one of the Gartner people kind of showed off their understanding of this stack as well. And from an analyst from like Gartner, they're going to try to load as many stuff into a stack like this as possible, along with the people concerns of it, and kind of divide it up. And so this gives you another look at, again, if you think about that platform, those two first platform diagrams they saw, it starts to look very similar, right? Infrastructure underneath here, the kind of middleware and management that you would have in the middle, and trying to get a sense of, like, at this top level, who's using it and how they're using it, right? And so these examples, right, this should start to give you an idea of what is as the guys here saying, what's in the platform, right? Like, what the layers are, the stacks are, what is in the domain for you to operate with. Now, the opposite of this, which hopefully we'll avoid, would be instead of taking our existing platforms that we have, we're going to build an entirely new one from another team. And now we have two problems, right? Like, it would be nice to avoid building yet another silo of things that becomes the tech debt and the legacy of the future. And so I think thinking about how it integrates into your existing notion of a platform is incredibly important. So amongst all the stuff that people are doing now, the people I've talked with and kind of seen what they're doing, there's one thing that's incredibly important to do right now. It's actually two things. I'm going to cheat a little bit. And that is, as I alluded to earlier, making sure you have whatever you want to call it, a gateway, a broker, a point of control in place for how the development teams and maybe some other people are using AI services, right? And like any API-based way, it's actually straightforward how you go about doing this, right? You access most all of these AI things through an API, following the OpenAI sort of, I don't think it's a standard, but the way of doing it. And so you're basically doing the old trick of sticking yourself in the middle and having people point at that API and then brokering and figuring out what to doing and passing it along to the next thing, right? And if you don't have that in place, as you know from any service you provide, you can't really do anything except tell people what they should be doing, right? You have no way of enforcing and monitoring and doing things, so you need to have some kind of gateway in place, right? And hopefully, it's early enough in this that people can start putting those gateways in place. Now, this is kind of a diagram of what the Tanzu platform does right now when it comes to not only providing that gateway, but allowing you to run models if you want to inside the platform itself and integrating. And, of course, if you want to have this work with VMware Private AI Foundation, that's just also a collection of models that are running that have an API endpoint, so you can put the gateway on top of that as well. And in either case, the other thing that I think is, people don't talk about this so much because it's a little early in the cycle, but having a highly integrated software development stack that works with the platform eventually becomes very important for that developer productivity, that speed, right? So whether it's in Python or in Java, like Spring AI is, you want to have a development framework that your developers like to use, like Spring for Java or the various Python things, that is, let's say, manageable by the platform. And the ways of managing container cloud-based things are kind of well understood. As an example, you got to have whether you want to call it a secret, an API key to connect to a model. If you have a container-based application, you just inject that into the environment variables when you start the container up. And some development frameworks support that very easily, and some of them don't, right? So you've got to think about that kind of interactivity. So having a framework that works with the platform or a platform that works with a framework is another important thing to pay attention to. And of course, you're developing applications, and so you probably want all those other things that allow you to very rapidly develop applications, your developers, and also run them and secure them. Do all your ilities, if you remember the enterprise ilities that you need. Just whatever cool word you want, put ility at the end of it, and that's what people always need. So let's go over the practices, right? And I think I've kind of been alluding to this. So the first thing is to remember one of the foundational things of platform engineering. Back before it was called platform engineering, we called it platform as a product. And the idea was that we're building this infrastructure for application developers. And if we think of these application developers as customers, we're product managing that infrastructure so that the infrastructure is helping them out as much as possible, so that it's not, so that it's not a hindrance in the name of being perfect and good, if you will. That's a terrible way of putting it. But the idea is that if you product manage something, kind of like a software vendor or a cloud service provider would be, and you know who your customers are, you're going to build a platform with all of those services I've been talking about that your customers, the developers, want to use, and that's going to solve a lot of your problems ongoing, right? You're going to have a better experience. I don't know about you, but when I use a product and I enjoy using it, from like cereal to cars to clickers, if I like using it, things go a lot better. And you can think about that when it comes to this notion of product managing a platform. Now, to that end, it's important in a field like this to ask, well, who are the customers, right? And so far, I've been talking about kind of this third column over here, right? The traditional customers of platform engineering are application developers building applications, right? A platform as a service thing, they need all those services, et cetera, right? So this is actually the area that when you look at it in the AI world, that there's the least amount of things going on. So if you look at the way that AI is being used now, there's not an incredible amount of applications where AI is just kind of being used in the background as instead of like a primary thing, right? Like there's some instances of it that you see here and there that I think are interesting, particularly this, as I like to think of it, sloppy integration thing, where instead of having perfect data integrations and searching things up, for example, if you were doing claims processing for an insurance company, you sort of, in addition to that, you give a bunch of data sources to the AI and you're kind of like, I don't know, you figure it out, right? Like not the totality of how you're doing your claims processing, but you get this additional information that then you can have people use. Now, of course, the most famous usage, especially in our industry, is programming, right? Like doing the kind of like AI-generated coding that you have. Also kind of getting into, there's a great Explore Las Vegas talk kind of going over some theory about what that looks like for the entire, if you remember, software lifecycle development. Software lifecycle development cycle? There you go, software development lifecycle, SDLC. I don't remember it. It's such an older term. But how are developers using AI for tools for their own work, right? And that is equally interesting because if you want to run, if you want to have a private way of doing this instead of relying on public clouds, maybe a platform engineer is someone who runs that service as well, who runs that model that people use. And then finally, I think the way that I see the most applications now is basically just like a replication of what we see in the consumer space. Here's a chat window. Let's load it up with a bunch of data and contextual information. And whether it's an internal employee or a customer, they open up the chat thing. And it's like, we've always had these little chat windows in the lower right-hand corner, but they've all been pretty awful. And it's like, it'll probably be better this time. Like if we load that in and we rely on the Gen AI thing to do so. There's a lot of customization that comes with that, but you also have, I mentioned Goose, you also have these things, you can download these apps, like this open source Goose thing, hook it up to whatever model you want. Again, remember, if you're brokering that model, it could be your own or other ones. And you've got a full-on like chat interface that will allow you to add plugins, do a tremendous amount of customization that the normals, the non-tech people and tech people can use in your organization. And that's why I think that talk by Angie at Block, formerly Square, is valuable, because she goes over that use case. So then the next thing that comes up right away is that Center of Excellence, that policy review board. Now, I don't know if you lived through the Cloud Center of Excellence era, like I did in the 2010s, but that was sort of like once you were doing a project and you heard Cloud Center of Excellence, you started looking for a new job, because it was going to be a long time before anything happened. It's a very slow process. Of course, I'm sure all the people in this room, if you were involved in it, you did a great job and you were the exception that proved the rule. But your friends who are suffering, now you know. And you see this over and over again, rightly so. I mean, you've got to figure out some policy. And in the people I've talked with who go through this policy successfully, these boards, what they say is, if you want to have a fast way of setting your AI policy, bring two groups, primarily two groups. Bring your legal people, which are not renowned for their speed, because there's a lot of licensing that's new and different and things like that. So you want your legal people to help you set policy, and bring the security people. Because, of course, you got to have security. But the interesting thing about security people is they have a high propensity, or they've got a relatively high propensity to like know what they're doing is wrong. Have a model that allows them to very quickly analyze something and come up with an answer, right? And so the way you get to these kind of bottlenecks is, instead of coming up with theoretic problems and things that happen, you get these two people, the legal and the security people, and they're very focused on practical today things. And they tend to speed up this process more than if you have all sorts of other people involved who kind of bring different issues to the table. So this is just an example from one of our customers of like the result of that kind of team working, right? And you can imagine like all the conversations that go around these different models, but think about how you speed up that center of excellence so it doesn't become a center of slowdown like we've seen in the past. Now, just a couple more things. One is that, I mean, this is true for any type of application, but it's also always worth remembering, and especially true here, where so much of what you're doing with AI, at least at the moment, is figuring out how your organization works, fitting the data that you have to it in the context, and also wanting to integrate it with your existing systems. And if all of that like doesn't really work very well, you're just like adding another layer on top of something that doesn't work, right? So especially in the initial things that you're doing, you want to think about, at the very least, is my data in a good enough shape to having AI stuff wrapped around it, right? Like to put it one way, one of my coworkers used to say, containers are not going to fix your broken culture, right? Your broken organization, and just adding in some AI isn't going to do that as well. You've got to think about, is our infrastructure, are the data sources that we have, are the way that we do software, is this just going to be another thing, or are those in good enough shape to make us successful at that? So finally, a lot of this is oriented around speed, if you will, which is, sounds cool, but I wouldn't think about it so much as speed as frequency, right? And one of the things in the old digital transformation era of the 2010s that we sort of tested out is that if you're trying something new in an organization, you're trying new types of ways of interacting with your customers, your employees with software, you don't really know exactly what you're doing, right? And so if you don't know what you're doing in a case like that, you want to do a lot of it quickly, right? And the point is to learn, right? So you want to be able to experiment, have a safe way of doing that. And I think having that orientation, right, is perfect for what platforms do, right? If you remember all the way back to what a definition of a platform is, it's built around the notion of self-service access for developers to very rapidly get their applications into production very frequently so they can learn what's going on. Not only the developers, but also the business can learn how to do this stuff. So if you're interested in checking out and learning more about doing AI platform stuff, back at Explore in Tanzu, we released this AI starter kit. And especially for people in this room, what's great about this is there's a good chance you already have the Tanzu platform and you already have access to it. And in this case, it's even better because you can get a 90-day trial I don't think I'm supposed to say free trial, but a 90-day trial. There's all sorts of legal language around this. But you can just go to this QR code, kind of read how to do it, and you can just get it up and running on VCF. And just set it up for your teams and start to learn what's going on, get the experience of running your own AI stuff and platform engineering for it. So thanks. It was great to talk with y'all, and I'm always happy to hear what people are up to and talk more. And if you want the slides, there's that stuff. And enjoy the rest of the conference.